Welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast, a program dedicated to helping you have a closer walk with God by sharing biblical truths and relatable testimonies of women who have overcome. Whether you're a seasoned believer or just starting your spiritual journey, this podcast has something for you. Each episode will supply encouragement and wise, practical advice to inspire and challenge you to abide in the one who has all the answers to life's questions. A woman who abides in the shadow of the Almighty is a woman who lives safe and secure. Sit back and enjoy a few minutes of positive conversation with your host, Jennifer Beal, and friends.
Help me abide in the one who has the power. Help me abide each day and every hour. Remind me that without you, my efforts are in vain, so that others will see you. Help me abide.
Welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast. Today's episode, we are delighted to have Rachel Wyatt as our guest. Rachel is an incredible missionary who has dedicated her life to serving the people of Tanzania Africa. She has been living in Tanzania for over 16 years, working tirelessly to proclaim the gospel to the Tanzanian people. Their ministry holds a stadium crusade every year where tens of thousands of people have heard the gospel. Their largest attendance at a crusade was 20,000 people. They have started 4 churches and have seen thousands of people saved throughout their ministry. When asking Rachel to brag a little bit about their ministry and what the Lord has done, she was quick to humble herself and lift up Christ. She expressed her identity is not what she had accomplished, but rather in who she is, a child of God. In this episode, Rachel will share her experiences, insights, and challenges as a missionary. Her favorite food in Tanzania is pilau and okra. I hope that okra's fried, side note. Join us as we learn more about her inspiring journey and the incredible work she is doing to help those in need of Jesus. Welcome, listeners. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Missionary to Tanzania Africa, Rachel Wyatt. Rachel, welcome to the Help Me Abide podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. So, Rachel, tell us what your childhood was like.
Well, I grew up in a Baptist pastor's home in Iowa, in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. If you've ever been to Southeast Iowa, it's pretty much just cornfields and a bunch of farmers. But it was a good, peaceful life. I lived in the same house ever since I was 4 years old. And my brother actually still owns that house, and that is still our stateside address. So my address has never moved. I went to the same church my whole life, which is still our home church, which my dad pastored and my brother pastors now. But it was good. I had 6 siblings. There were 5 girls and 2 boys. And we grew up on, of course, my dad was a pastor, so our farm wasn't like a working farm, but it was a farm of sorts. We had all kinds of animals, 10 acres, a pond, barn. My mom homeschooled all of us. And when we weren't doing school inside, we were running around barefoot out in the yard with the animals and chickens. And so it was good. It was good.
Yeah, so living the dream, living in the same house, going to the same church, having all of that security. So I'm assuming you enjoyed your childhood.
Yes, I did very much.
When did you get saved?
So I got saved whenever I was 9 years old. As a lot of second generation Christians, I thought I had been saved way earlier. But it was more of, no, you got saved when you were 3. Don't you remember? And I just went along with everybody. But when I was 9, and I thought I was so old. Now looking back, I think I was still a young child. But when I was 9, I thought, oh, I'm too old to get saved. You know, all of my friends have been saved. But my sister, Joanna, was doing a devotion with us. We always had evening devotions with my parents, and my parents were on a date. And so my older sister, who's 6 years older than me, was doing the devotion. And she happened to say, if you don't remember when you got saved, then maybe you weren't saved. And so when mom and dad came back, I told mom, I don't remember getting saved. Everybody said that I got saved when I was 3, but I don't remember it. And so my mom took me in her bedroom, and we knelt down beside of her bed, and I got saved. But I had already been baptized earlier. I don't even know, I guess maybe when I was 4. I don't remember the first baptism. And so I was embarrassed after I had gotten saved when I was 9. I had that pressure of, but everybody's going to think, what are they going to think of me? And now I look back, like I said, I think I was only 9 years old, but in my mind, I was so old and, this mature, ripe Christian. And so I did not get baptized until I was 13. And it really bothered me. The Holy Spirit worked on me all the time about it. When I was 13, a friend of mine, I happened to mention to her that I actually haven't been baptized after I got saved. And she said, you know what? It's not worth feeling this conviction and not able to move forward in life over what people think. And that was kind of the prompt that prompted me to go ahead and get baptized when I was 13. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a similar story. I got saved when I was 5, but then, well, not similar in that I probably got saved 700 times after that, because
Yeah.
every time somebody would preach on hell or somebody would talk about salvation, I say, well, why don't I just make sure?
Yes.
Let me just make sure.
Yeah. I would say,
So it
Lord, if I'm
wasn't
not saved, please save me now.
exactly like, let's just make sure. I could say that sinner's prayer again, no big deal. And I think I felt guilt because I would sin and I would feel like I would disappoint God. So I liked that. If I got saved, everything was under the blood. So then I could start over. So I think I liked that idea. So it wasn't until college that I got things settled for sure. I went down the altar and I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with, I don't know. I'm trusting
Right.
you and only you, and I'm free falling into you. And I got saved, but I did not get baptized at college because of the embarrassment of people thinking, oh, this girl is a soul winner and she's at Bible college. She wasn't even saved. So, which
Yes.
is ridiculous. And that's the enemy. I waited until the summer and I went home to my home church, which was smaller, around 300 people. And I got baptized there. And even then I got a lot of questions like, hey, what's going on? And so it was an opportunity for me to tell people what I had been struggling through. Like you said, all of that guilt and all those feelings went right away as soon as I obeyed what I was supposed to do.
Yes.
So I was glad that I did that. So good job, friend,
Yes.
for prompting you to do that. So okay, so you got saved, you got baptized. After graduating high school, you started working for your dad?
I actually started working for as secretary for our church before I graduated high school because we were homeschooled. I could work. I've been working full-time jobs ever since I was about 14 years old, I think.
Wow.
But I became full-time secretary of our church when I was 16. So I finished high school around 16, but I didn't go to college until I was 19, I think it was. So I was just working there. I enjoyed being secretary, but it kind of came to a point. Our church was decently large, running around 700 people or so, but it kind of came to a point. It kind of came to a point though where there were no. I needed to get out on my own, kind of spread my wings in a secure environment, and there were no dating possibilities in our church, and so it was kind of. I never really had a desire to go to college for college's sake. I didn't necessarily want to get a degree. I actually was very interested in politics, and I had considered pursuing that. And when I was 18, President Bush was running for the second time. So I started campaigning like for the Iowa caucuses and was actually elected to the national convention and on the platform committee and all of that. Yeah, so I was really interested in that type stuff. And I didn't know whether I wanted to pursue that, but I had always pictured myself in the ministry. And so I thought, well, maybe God will have me marry a politician. I finally, when I was about 19, I decided to go to college, and I went to Hyles-Anderson. My brother was there and it was close to home. So my siblings went to all over to different colleges, but that just seemed like a good fit for me since my brother was already there and it was close to home. So I went to Hyles-Anderson and I met Jerry right away. As soon as I got there, he knew I was coming because he worked with my brother. And so he was already kind of interested in Joseph's sister.
Okay.
But anyway, so we met, I think the first week or second week of college and started dating right away. And so then by the second, Jerry's second semester of his last year, I know that's all confusing, but anyway,
No, makes sense.
Yeah, we were engaged. We got engaged that February. So I went back and took the minimum amount of credits just to stay in the dorm, just so we could be together when we were engaged and planning the wedding and everything. So, and then we got married that summer.
Okay. Now, Jerry knew that he wanted to be a missionary when he went to college?
Yes. So Jerry grew up here in Tanzania, actually here in the exact same city that we're in now. And he surrendered to go back as a missionary when he was 17. So when he went to college, he knew that he was going to Africa. And he's always been rock solid on his calling. So it was no question. And so whenever I started dating him, it was a little bit difficult because, I'm just trying to get to know this guy, but I kind of have to cross this hurdle of, am I willing to live my life in Africa? Because there's no reason to even start this relationship if I'm not open to going to Africa. But it's hard to know, hey, yeah, I'll go to Africa with this guy when you don't even know him. So it was kind of it was a little bit tricky to maneuver. And I actually had several girls at college that would come up to me and say, he's going to Africa, don't you? You're not going to pull him off the mission field. And I was like,
okay.
Yes, I know. But we started dating, and I knew that I could not say no to someone who was everything that I would look for in a spouse just because he was going to Africa. And I know that there's different schools of thought on this, and you may get kickback from this, but we were always raised that if a woman was to be married, that the man is called to the mission and the woman is called to the man. And so with that mindset, I thought, if I am supposed to marry this man, it doesn't matter what his mission is. I am called to him. And so if he's called to missions, if he's called to Africa, then I guess I'm called there as well. So, with that mindset, I thought, I can't not date somebody just because of what God has called him to do in his life. And so I still had zero desire to go to Africa, to be a missionary. But I knew that Jerry was exactly the type of guy that I should marry. And so we started dating on that premise. And he knew that I was not really excited about Africa. But we started dating, and my dad said, well, if you're, of course, my dad is notorious for checking people out and making, calling every contact that they've ever known. And
wait, can I say something here? I am not mad at that. Now that my kids are old, I think I'm going to do the same thing.
Yes, my dad always says, if you can't get a job in the corporate world without them calling references and doing online searches of you, why in the world would I give my child to you without doing the same?
I love that.
So,
Thank you.
So he checked Jerry out, and he said, you will never find a better guy than Jerry Wyatt. And so, and as my parents always said, we don't choose who you marry, we just choose who you don't marry. And so he said, Jerry has the green light as long as, now as Dad would say, the ball's in your court. He's a go with us, the ball's in your court. And it's funny, just a funny story. Mom, when they knew I was starting to date a boy from that was going back to Africa, Mom was like, oh, she's going to end up in Africa. And so Mom came up for a lady spectacular just a couple months after we had started dating. And later she said, I was hoping that I would show up and I would meet him in person and he would be a total jerk. And then we could put the brakes on the relationship and say no. And so when she came back from Lady Spectacular, my dad had not met him there. He had talked to him on the phone. But she came walking in the house and Dad said, so how was he? And Mom said, oh, it's awful. It's just awful. And Dad said, really? Like Rachel would, he seemed fine when I checked him out. And Mom said, it's awful because he's wonderful. She's going to end up in Africa. So, but anyway, so Dad said, before he tells you he loves you, before you get engaged, I want you to go visit Africa. His family was still here because he was in college. And he said, I don't want Jerry to go with you because I don't want it just to be rose-colored glasses, a dating trip. He said, I want you to go by yourself, visit I actually flew with his sister for 3 weeks. And he said, I want you to be going into this with your eyes open. He said, I don't want you to get married and then see the field for the first time and say, I can't do this, or blame, why didn't you stop me? Or I didn't know what I was getting into. And now after living here for so many years, I see the wisdom in that, whenever I face the inevitable hard times, I think this was my choice. I knew what I was getting into. And so I did. I came after that first year we dated. And then that summer I flew to Africa. I had been to Mexico and Canada before, but it was my first time overseas. And I stayed with his family for 3 weeks. And so it was just a lot to deal with. Because if you've ever been on a mission trip, you probably remember your first mission trip overseas. It's like major culture shock. And especially if you're thinking, especially if you're thinking, this is going to be my life. You know, every person you see, every store you go to, if you're thinking, this is going to be my life, it is a lot to deal with. And so I got back after the 3 weeks. While I was here, I said, God, if you will get me out of this place, I will never step foot here again. No, I cannot do this. I like things clean and neat and orderly, and things are not clean and neat and orderly here, well, to put it mildly. And so when I got back, I broke up with him. He told me he loved me as soon as I got back, because that was the threshold. My dad said, you can't tell her you love her until she goes to visit Africa. So as soon as I got back, he told me he loved me, and I said, the relationship is over. I said,
oh man.
And I said, I love you. I had no doubt that I loved him, but I could not. And so we were apart for a couple months over the summer, and I just did a lot of praying. And it came down to, I would make lists of, you know, the pros and the cons, and Jerry checked every box. But the only thing on the con side was Africa. I didn't want to live in Africa. And it came down to, I realized that I just would not surrender I wanted to be in politics, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to stay in America. And I had lived in, like I said, in Iowa my whole life, in the same church, in the same home, in the same security. And just to go to Africa to live the rest of my life seems so daunting. But it came down to where I just knew it's because I wouldn't surrender. And I knew that if I don't surrender, to marry Jerry because I won't surrender to Africa, that I would miss God's will for my life. And so I finally, Jerry had kept in contact with my dad all through this breakup time. And so finally, my dad said, well, told Jerry, I think that she's ready to at least pursue the relationship again. So we got back together, and he knew that I still did not have a desire or peace or anything. Well, I guess I wouldn't say peace. I knew that I was doing the right thing, but the desire definitely was not there yet. And so we got married, even with that, went on deputation. And Jerry would always cringe as pastors' wives would say, so have you always wanted to be a missionary? Because he knew I would be like, no, I actually nope. I know. And but you know what? It kind of, most pastors respected that, because in pastors' wives, because I would say, no, but I know that I'm supposed to be with Jerry, and Jerry knows he's supposed to be there. And so I said, so if Jerry's supposed to be in Africa, then I am too. And it was several years. I struggled a lot for the first couple of years. My mom died just after we had been here for a year. She died of cancer. Never able to come. But we were here probably 3 years. And I remember when we first came, I, of course, cried every day. And I remember one day thinking, I'm just going to cry every day for the rest of my life, and it's just going to have to be okay. And I remember the first day when I was going to bed at night, and I thought, I didn't cry today. I don't know how long it had been, months probably. And I thought, I didn't cry today. And it was definitely a love comes softly for me. I always say, missionaries normally go through the honeymoon stage, and then the, other stages. I just started at rock bottom, so it was up from there. But we were probably here for 3 or 4 years before we had gone back to the States for one of the times. I think it was we actually went back to the States twice in the first year, because my mom, we went back when she got really sick, and then we came back here, and then she died. So we had to go back for the funeral. But so it had been probably the third or fourth time back. And when I came back in to my home here in Tanzania, I just had this wave of happiness and peace flow over me. And I thought, oh, it's so good to be home. And I realized that was the first time that I realized that my heart had really kind of grounded here. And now it's been 14, and I'm sure there were people, over 14 years ago that were like, oh, that will never last, but I think that when it came down to it, it's principle over emotion. And yes. I knew I'm supposed to be married to this man, and he was rock solid on his calling. And so as long as I just kept doing what I needed to do every day and what I knew was right, and just kept surrendering to, okay, this is what God has for my life, then here I am. And
yes, here you are.
And now if he told me he was moving back, we are moving back, I would struggle with it probably just as much as I struggled with moving here. So
praise the Lord. That's amazing. I love that story. Neither Brett or I were missions majors. So when Brett told me that God was made it clear that we were supposed to be in Africa, I cried like a baby. You hear a lot of missionary wives, and they knew that they were going to be missionaries ever since they were young, and they would watch the videos and they would feel this tug at their heart. Like,
yes.
I get that, and I admire that, but that wasn't me. I wanted to be a pastor's wife. I wanted to be in full-time Christian service, and Africa, like anywhere but Africa. So
Yes.
it's funny how the Lord moves. God's good, and 14 years later, I mean, you could see all the fruit that has come from your surrender. Sometimes God asks us to do things that don't make us super happy, but then he gives us the joy after we surrender. So praise the Lord.
Right.
Awesome story.
Connie Marujo here, resource promoter for the Help Me Abide podcast. Have you been searching for Christ-centered music? Do you struggle to find quality, faith-based music that uplifts Christ and doesn't appeal to your flesh? Faith Music Missions has you covered. Say goodbye to skipping songs because of their ungodly lyrics or worldly beats. Welcome to the Faith Music Missions streaming app, your solution for Christ-centered music. With Faith Music Missions, you have access to the entire library with the ability to create playlists and save your favorites to listen to again and again. As a bonus, you can tune into their radio station 24/7. By using Faith Music Missions, you're not just enjoying great music, you're also supporting a mission to spread the love of Christ through the music and ministry. And for a limited time, for the first month, it's free. Head on over to our website, helpmeabide.com, or check out our show notes to download the app today and start creating a safe and uplifting musical environment for your whole family. Now, let's get back to the interview.
So in retrospect now, can you see God preparing you in your childhood in any particular way to be a missionary?
Yeah, I think that I watched my parents live a life of surrender. And
Yeah.
my mom, I am natured a lot like my mom. And anybody that knew my mom, Diane Brown, would know she was a very no nonsense, not super emotional, not super flighty, very down to earth, practical lady. And I think that has served me well on the mission field. I'm not a super emotional person. And you know, from living on the mission field, that a lot of emotions can cause problems. I mean, I'm not saying someone who's emotional couldn't be, but you deal with a lot of pain and a lot of hardship. So I think that practical way of common sense looking at things that my mom kind of instilled in me has really served me well, even just on practical things like just rolling with the punches. Of course, being a pastor's wife, you kind of have to do that, but plans change and you figure out how to make the best of it and you improvise and you roll with it. She was a very simple person. She wasn't always getting her nails done and her hair done and had to have a perfect house. And I think that served me well here because I grew up kind of more simple like that. And so I don't miss my pedicures and manicures and trips to the mall and all of that like I could have. And of course, growing up in rural Iowa also helps. So I think that practical, just down to earth, living life for others. Also, mom was very, very selfless and she lived her life unoffended and constantly pouring out to others. And that serves you well as a missionary because you live your life constantly pouring out to others and you don't really have a lot of margin to be offended over things and things people say and do. And so I think that type of childhood and that type of example that my mom left me has really prepared me well.
Oh, what a great testimony from your mom. What a great example.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, my biggest challenge in Africa was all of the ladies all wanted to marry my husband. They, I don't know if it was because he was white or they thought he had money or he was American. It didn't matter if they knew me. It didn't matter. And I don't know if Ghana is different than Tanzania, but I really struggled with that. I would say it took me years to even decide that I was going to love them because they were all, to me, they were all trying to steal my husband. And that really bothered me. So that was my biggest challenge that I had to overcome. What challenges have you faced?
For me, I think there's a lot. We've been robbed many times. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, we came home from a birthday party of a staff member, and I came in at the house. I unlocked the door. My kids went into their rooms, and we're getting dressed. This was just, the end of June, I think it was. And I came to come into our bedroom, and I saw all of our drawers pulled out and like clothes everywhere. And so I walked back out, and my husband was doing something with the dogs, which thankfully they were still alive. And I said, honey, did you pull the drawers out of our bed? I knew when I saw it, I thought, oh dear. So I didn't know, are they still in the house? So I said, honey, did you pull the drawers out of the bedroom for any reason? And he said, no. And I said, we got robbed. And so he said, all right, just come out. And so I didn't know where the kids were. Lauren was already in her bedroom, my 6-year-old. So he got a big machete. And of course, there's no 911 to call. You just deal with these things by yourself. So he went in with a big machete. We kind of searched the house, and they were already gone. They had come in through a back window of our daughter's room. Well, we've been robbed 8 times that I can remember. Wow. It's always trying. Of course, there's health. Everything is dirty. But I think that there wouldn't be one specific big challenge. I think it is the 5 million little challenges. The challenge with the water, and then the electric, and then the dirt, and then you get sick. And then it's just, the grocery stores are out of things, and you've got to go to 8 different grocery stores to get your little list of things. And, it's all of the little things. There's a saying, and I don't know if they have it in Ghana, but everything is hard in Africa. Everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It's hard. Doing laundry is hard. Getting water is hard. Everything is hard. And I think the biggest challenge would be all of the little challenges. And you just get very, very, very weary. And I think for a lot of missionaries, the breaking point, it's, normally it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's not one big giant thing. It's just, you just get very weary of the fight. It's you're fighting on every front. You're fighting on the spiritual front. You're fighting cultural. You're fighting the government to even be able to stay there. You're fighting just on every front, your health and to stay clean. And you just get very weary. In the States, you have ladies meetings and conferences and even friends that, you go to church and they relate with you on every level, and you're able to build each other up. But when you're on the mission field, especially if you don't have a team, you don't have conferences to go to, and you're not going to bridal showers that you're used to. And like even the wedding today is so far different than what you would be used to. And so you can just get in a very discouraged and low place because you're constantly pouring out, and you just can get very, very weary of the fight. And then often there's one, like I said, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you just can't handle anymore. So that's what I would probably say.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just tired of fighting. And like you said, in every area, emotionally, physically, spiritually, you just want rest.
I said that to Jerry so many times. Sometimes he'll come and I say, Jerry, I'm just tired of fighting.
I'm just tired.
Tired of fighting.
Yes. Oh, I can definitely relate to that feeling in America too.
Yes. Yeah.
We live in California, and sometimes I feel like we're on a mission field, a very, very, very well taken care of mission field. But these, people are people. So what specific area of personal growth have you experienced through your service?
And I'm sure you hear this from all missionaries, but faith. It comes down to you just have to have faith that you're doing what you should be doing, faith that God will take care of you, faith that these people will get it. Yeah, I think just learning to trust. My husband and I have a saying that we say often when things are just not going the way that they should. And we always just say, God knows. God knows.
Yeah.
We don't know, but God knows. And so I think just in that area, you just have to learn to just let go. Just let go. God knows.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, God made it so clear that you were supposed to be there. And I feel like when we know we're exactly where we're supposed to be, we have faith that God is going to do something because we're where we're supposed to be. There is a peace that comes. You knew 14 years ago, like this isn't what you wanted, but this is what God wanted. He made it clear. So when you're going through the tough time, you're like, man, God, I trust that you know what you're doing, because sometimes it's hard. How did the role of faith help you overcome difficult situations? I guess you just talked about that, but do you have anything else to add?
So kind of where that faith thing came to a climax was my son had a head injury. It's kind of a long story, but he fell about 5 feet straight on his head onto the hard tile floors, like the concrete tile floors here, and had all the symptoms of a concussion. So we are 5 hours from our capital city, which would be any sort of hospital that you would want to go to. The hospital in our city is horrible, to say the least. We always say we wouldn't go there for a Band-Aid. But we had no choice but to take him to this hospital because we didn't know if his brain was swelling. It was a Sunday morning. Jerry was already at church. So David would have been 3.5 because I was expecting my third. I was expecting Andrew. He had gone back to get a baby bottle out of my daughter's crib. Anyway, had fallen, and I heard that scream that every mother hears that is, is different. And I went running back, and I saw blood projected across the floor that had come from his head. He didn't have any open injuries, but it had come from his nose and his mouth. And so, like I said, there's no 911 to call. And so he's screaming. And so finally I get him calmed down, and then he just starts, like, his eyes rolling back, going to sleep.
My goodness.
So I didn't know, is he minutes from dying? Is his brain bleeding? What, swelling? What is going on? So I frantically called Jerry. I said, you've got to come home. I don't know what's going on with David, but there's blood across the floor. He just fell straight onto his head. I didn't know if his neck was broken, He rushed home. As he was rushing home, he called the head of the hospital here in our city. And he was like, oh, just let him rest, and Jerry's like, no. Anyways, so we knew that we could not strike out for Dar es Salaam, which is 5 hours away. If his brain was swelling, we knew we would never make it. And so we had no choice but to take him into this hospital here. And so we bundle him up. Jerry gets home. We put him in our car. Of course, there's no ambulance to call. There's no paramedics. There's no 911. There's nothing. It's just you. And so, you're praying. I'm Googling, and I'm figuring, okay, blood didn't come from the ears. That's good. It came from the nose and the mouth. That's better. And of course, I'm not a doctor, but you just rely on WebMD.
Yeah.
And so you get a medical knowledge really quick. But anyway, so we take him to the hospital, and we go in, and they have this, I can't even describe the situations of the hospitals here, but they're very bad. And so they did have a old x-ray machine, like from the 60s. I mean, I'm thinking, is that thing even working? How much radiation is it pumping into him? And I remember I was standing out. They wouldn't let me go in the x-ray room because I was pregnant with my third child. And I could see him in his little Mickey Mouse pajamas sitting on this just paint chip bench with this archaic x-ray machine. They were trying to x-ray his head to see what his brain was doing, probably not even able to see what they needed to. And I kept thinking, if only we were in the States, if we could have called 911. My hometown is only 30 minutes from the University of Iowa, which is an amazing hospital. And I kept thinking, if only we were at the University of Iowa, if only we were at the university, they would know what to do. They would be able to, do surgery if they needed to. And I'm looking at him, and they're thinking, they're not even going to be able to figure out what's going on. And I had all of these thoughts rushing through my head as I'm standing out on this horrible surroundings. And I just felt God tell me, he said, Rachel, either you trust me or you don't. At that moment, I knew I would have to trust God if I was in the States.
Yes.
To protect my child. And God was telling me, you know what? I can protect him here just as much as I can protect him if he was at the Mayo Clinic. Either you trust me or you don't. So I think so often, because we are surrounded in the States with so many, we have a credit card. So if we run out of money, we can charge it on our credit card, and we have 911. We feel like you don't have to trust God quite as much because you've got a fallback, you've got a backup plan. And whenever all of that is stripped away and you realize, I have no choice but to trust God. So do I trust you or don't I trust you? And in that moment, I realized, okay, well, I'm just going to trust you. God, I would rather be here in this hospital in Africa with you protecting him than in the best hospital in the States without you. And whenever I did, I just had the most amazing peace wash over me. And I thought, I'm just going to trust you, because either I trust you or I don't trust you.
Yeah.
And I chose to trust him. And I think that was kind of a turning point in my life. And he was fine. They never found anything.
Praise the Lord.
I really believe God just healed him right then. He had a terrible bruising all over his face, but he ended up being fine. But that was kind of a turning point. And since then, when things have happened, whether it's injuries or break-ins or a multitude of other things, I always just go back to, either you're going to trust me or you're not going to trust me. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose to trust. That's what, since then, have helped me get through incredibly difficult situations.
Just, are you going to trust me or not? I love that statement that the Holy Spirit gave to you. It's very, very powerful. And I'm glad that he healed your son. And it's true. I think we in America feel like we have some level of control because we have so much support. But honestly, we're not in control at all. We just, it's an illusion of control. So yeah, great story. So can you describe a time on the field when you had to completely surrender an area of your life to God's perfect will?
Yeah, as I was thinking about that question, I was thinking probably that story that I just told. I had to surrender my kids.
Definitely.
I actually gave birth to all 4 of my kids here on the field. So I've never had a baby in America.
Wow.
They've all been born here in Tanzania. So yeah, I think the area as a mother, it's the area of children. You have to surrender them, their health, their safety, their future. I mean, most likely we will live here until we are too old to live here. And most likely the vast majority of our children, we have 4, will probably end up back in America. So I have to surrender, hey, I probably am not going to live anywhere near my grandchildren. So I think as a mom and the stage of life that I'm in, it's surrounding the kids. You've got to just give it to God. Just let go.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do. But he's worthy. He's worthy. So what have you learned from the people you serve?
Yeah, Tanzanian women are very laid back. They laugh a lot. They don't have anything, materialistically speaking, but they are joyful, happy people. And they're very, very laid back people. So just very Hakuna Matata, which is actually a Swahili phrase. And it really does mean
no way.
Yes, it is. It's Swahili. Hakuna.
There is so
none,
cool.
and Matata is there's no troubles. So yes, we really do live on the Hakuna Matata side of life. COVID never even made a dent over here. Everyone just bebopped along like normal. So it was great. It was great.
Wow.
But they are very laid back. They laugh all the time. They call each other mama. Everybody's a mama. Tanzanian women do not get offended, or it's very, very rare for them to get offended. Just a Hakuna Matata life. And just just live life on the easier side. It's going to be okay, and don't get offended about things, and live life selfishly and move on.
Yeah, and that is definitely biblical. Great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. So good job, Tanzanian people. Do you speak Swahili?
I do.
Wow. Can you say something for us, or?
So nitende kusema nini? Aya nitaongea na wewe, ninashukuru kama naweza kuongea na wewe na labda kuwasaidia wengine. So
Wow. So was that difficult to learn?
It took a long time to learn it. It's really not, compared to languages of the world, it's really not a difficult language to learn, but anybody that learned a language as an adult know any foreign language is hard to learn when you're learning it as an adult.
So do you feel like you could communicate completely with someone?
Yes, I do. I understand about probably 90% of what is said.
Okay.
Sometimes it's harder to talk back. I'm able to talk back. I teach and things. And you have good days and bad days. You have days where you feel like, oh, goodness, I'm fluent. And then
Sure.
you have other days where you're like, I stumbled through that whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
And what about your kids? Do they know it?
yes, my oldest, David, is about to surpass me. We do
Wow.
school at home in English, and so they are obviously way stronger in English, but they
Uh-huh.
do play with their friends and everything in Swahili. So my younger three understand a decent amount. They don't speak a lot of it yet,
Okay.
but my oldest son, David, is fairly fluent. So.
Do you ever talk to Jerry in Swahili?
We used to when the kids were little, before they understood. We used to talk all the time in Swahili
Secret
so that they wouldn't
language.
understand. But they reached the age where they would say, Mom, we know what you're saying.
Doesn't work anymore. That's like spelling
Yeah.
it out in English. Yeah, Mom, I know how to read. Stink.
Yeah.
All right. So, what advice could you offer for those considering missionary work or looking to make a difference in the world?
I would just say do what you can. I love that verse in the Bible that says she hath done what she could.
Yes.
And sometimes women find themselves in a situation where you want to do a lot more than you're able to, but just find what you can do. Who can you encourage? Who can you help? Whether it's the little people God entrusted to you in your life, can you pour your life into them? Live for others, because being in full-time ministry or going on the mission field is not a magic pixie dust that suddenly you become a selfless person that lives your life for others. That starts now, wherever you are, in whatever stage you are in. It starts now, whatever age you are, and just living for others and realizing that life is short and eternity is long, and living for God is all that's really going to matter in the great scheme of life.
Yeah, I love life is short, eternity is long. Reminds me of the quote, this life will soon be past, only what's done for Christ will last. And that's so true. I've been guilty of saying, oh, when I get to Bible college, that's when I'll start doing this. Or, oh, when I get to the mission field, that's when I'll start investing in others. And I love that advice. Do it now, do it now.
Yes.
Start now, because like you said, there's not going to be a magic pixie dust where, oh, now you're going to be this fantastic Christian. No, it's a work in progress,
Right.
sanctification, and little by little by little. So that's great. Our podcast verse is Psalm 91:1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. What verse has helped you abide in the secret place?
Yeah, so actually Psalms 91, after one of our break-ins, a bad break-in. Most of our break-ins has been just neighborhood thugs wanting to take electronics and things like that. But we had one bad break-in where they came in the middle of the night. They had guns. They beat up our guard with machetes. They killed our dogs. They were a gang from another city. Thankfully, my husband heard them, and they ran. God protected us, but there were 5 men in our house in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And they were serious. They meant business. That break-in was very traumatizing. The kids were on the other side of the house. God protected them. They did not even wake up. We had alarms going off, but it was very fearful for me. I didn't know why the kids were quiet. I thought maybe that the gang had already been into their rooms, and I told my husband, I can't go in there. You're going to have to go into their rooms. Why aren't they awake? And just that whole surrounding was very traumatizing. And I actually have shared with others the paralyzing fear that can come whenever you're in situations. We had another situation where we lost our 2-year-old daughter in Dubai just for a while. Just the paralyzing fear where you can't think. It literally paralyzes you. It made me think of the famous quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And if you have ever felt that gripping, paralyzing fear, you realize that it's the fear to be feared, because it will completely demobilize you. Yes. And so whenever I was completely demobilized by fear, and I memorized Psalms 91. That one, of course, it was David. And, he probably would have had a lot of fear. Of course, he's running for his life, but memorizing Psalms 91, and I would quote that. That helped me a lot. But in my day-to-day life, I think I would have to say the verse Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. So often there are things that are going topsy-turvy in life, and you want to fix it as the woman. And okay, if I just email her, and then I'm going to call, and
Yes.
if I do this, and I just think, be still. Just be still and know that I am God. It will be okay. Going back to my mom and her practical wisdom, dad pastors a church there in Iowa for over 30 years. And so, of course, there are many times when there would have been lots of turmoil and things going on. And I remember mom saying that she would be washing dishes, and she would say to herself, I'm washing this dish and I am okay right now. Or I am folding the clothes and I am okay right now. At this minute, I'm not dying. I'm okay. And then she would move on to whatever, cleaning this room. I'm cleaning this room and I am okay. And sometimes times come in life where you just have to live that minute. I'm okay at this minute. I'm, brushing my hair and I am okay at this minute. And I think of that verse often, just be still and know that I am God. And so I think that has helped me when you feel like the world is falling down around your ears, just be still and know that I am God.
So powerful. I could totally relate to your mom when I was going through extreme anxiety and depression after the birth of our special needs daughter, Brooklyn. I remember saying, the wall is gray, the door is white. I just had to speak truth into myself because I had so much fear,
Right.
like you said, paralyzing fear that I couldn't do anything but be still and know that God's got it. God's got it under control. So yeah, that's wonderful. Other than the Bible, what resource has been the most helpful to you in your Christian walk?
I would have to say, hands down, Streams in the Desert, the devotional book, Streams in the Desert. Yep. It's cut up into manageable portions for busy moms who don't, in my mind, I'm a great reader. In reality, I squeeze in 5 minutes here and there.
Right.
And that devotional book, you can read a devotional in 5 or 6 minutes, but it's very deep. I think a lot of things out there are very shallow, and a lot of fluff, and a lot of kind of what you want to hear. And I'm not saying that, I've reached the point in my Christian, but a lot of things, it's like, well,
you need some meat.
let's cover some new ground here.
Yeah.
And I feel like Streams in the Desert is one of those that's very deep, but it's a yearly devotional, and where you read one every day, 365 days. And at the end of the book, I actually found myself wanting adversity, wanting God to try me, wanting trials, because you realize that is how you're going to grow. And sometimes as you're reading it, you almost feel like almost cheated that you haven't been tried like some of these people have. And it's very good. And if you're going through trials in your life, it is an excellent resource. I actually need to get a copy because I think I've had 2 or 3 copies, and I keep giving them away.
Yes, that's how I am with books.
Like, and so I don't have a copy right now. My sister-in-law just said, hey, she's reading it, and she has given it to a couple women who have had extreme tragedy in their life, in their church in the past couple of months. And so she said, hey, I've ordered a bunch on Amazon. Let me send you another one.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Yes. I love resources. Resources have been a lifeline to me. Just pointing out truth, and especially tribulation. I don't know why I thought throughout my Christian life, if I do this, and this right, then I'm just going to have this wonderful life of blessing and happiness and joy and peace, and there's nothing bad going to happen. But if you read the Bible, that is not the case. Christ is our example, and he went through some tough times. He was treated unfairly, and ultimately they took his life. So tribulation is not something that is anti-Christian. It's very Christian to go through tough times, and that tribulation works patience and patience experience, and that brings us hope, and it also allows us to help other people. So thank you, Rachel, so much for your time, and it's amazing that I get to talk to you in Tanzania, and I relate to so much of what you're saying with Africa. You've been there a lot longer than I was, but the Kofanosha Hospital was the hospital that we would never go to, the city hospital, and they called it the D ward, and that was the death ward. They would just put you there if they didn't know what to do with you, just to let you die. So Africa
Yes.
is no joke. Listeners, please pray. Put Rachel Wyatt on your prayer list. Pray for a hedge of protection around their family, that they would keep the faith and that she would have times of rest, and God would sustain her through all of the many straws that the enemy puts on her back and that she has to carry with such a ministry. So thank you, Rachel, for joining us on this podcast. I was encouraged.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
Really, really neat. And God bless you and your family.
Thank you. You too.
Their faces look so earnestly, their eyes are pleading longingly, wondering where their next meal will be. Just trying to make it day to day as their life so quickly slips away, with never a thought of their eternal destiny.
A world away, how blessed we are to live in this great land of ours, surrounded by such luxuries and wealth. We think we know of sacrifice, yet we give so little of our lives. It's time for us to look beyond ourselves.
There's someone you can reach, someone's life that you can't touch. How could you give so little when we've been given so much? Someone's future is depending on what you would do. And to someone in the world today, their only hope is you. What a shame to live our whole life long and stand before our God. What a pity it would be to hear him say these words. These are ones you could have reached. These are lives you should have touched. How could you give so little when I gave you so much? Someone's future was depending on what you would do. And to those that I put in your path, their only hope was you.
Let us strive for the goal to reach just one more soul.
What price could be too great to hear our Father say? These are ones that you have reached. These are lives that you have touched. Enter in, my faithful servant. To you I say, well done. Someone's future was depending on what you would do. And now they'll be forever grateful here in heaven with you. There's someone you can reach.
Thank you so much for listening to the Help Me Abide podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or through our podcast website, www.helpmeabide.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. The Help Me Abide podcast is a ministry of the Faith Baptist Church of Wildomar, California, pastored by Pastor Bruce Goddard. That being said, it's important to remember that this podcast is not a substitute for regular church attendance. We encourage all of our listeners to be faithful members of a local, independent, Bible-believing Baptist church. My heartfelt gratitude goes out to Mrs. Tammy Goddard, who facilitates the podcast, Lisa Grubb, who expertly directs our social media outreach, Connie Marujo, who tirelessly promotes our resources, and Lindsay Osgood, who provides the perfect musical accompaniment to the interviews. Without our amazing team, this podcast would not be possible. Also, big thanks to Faith Music Missions for allowing us to use their beautiful music on our podcast. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content.